Hello and welcome to another video for the yearbook. Today we are going to be talking about Nergal, Triglavian assault frigate. Now this ship is quite unusual. When I talk with other people about Nergal, they usually say, yeah, it's a nice ship to run burner missions, or this is a ship you can use in high tier frigate abyssals with Deacon and Retribution, for example. But what about solo PvP? Well, this ship is not really used in solo PvP. And if we look at the data, indeed, Nergal is really off meta. Only a few frigates are less popular than Nergal. But in terms of win rates, it is actually the best and by far the best frigate. Of course, high win rates do not really mean that much for frigates that are used as little as Nergal. But when I worked at 2025 yearbook, I had to test this ship quite extensively to give opinions and tested fits for Nergal. And my opinion is that this is indeed one of the, if not the best frigate for solo PvP currently. Now, why this ship is so good? Well, I think the most crucial advantage of Nergal is incredible tank. If you fight 1v1, it's actually very difficult to break Nergal. Because against medium and large size weapons you can simply mitigate, and against small sized weapons and small drones the raw numbers just aren't there to break the tank. And even though the initial damage is not that great, it spools up pretty fast. And if you can't break Nergal, you will soon face an overwhelming damage that you cannot really mitigate or tank on your own. So with Nergal has 2, 3, 4 slot layout, fairly unusual, but it works fine because it needs only one gun, and it can fit pretty decent tank thanks to 4 low slots. Nergal can brawl, and I think the majority of feats that you will see on the kill board are brawling feats, and the reason why you see them on the kill boards is because they are not that good. The main archetype for this ship, I believe, is kiting, because when you kite, you can really use the strengths of this ship. So you can mitigate, you don't need to face tank as much, and you're also not as vulnerable against hard counters. And the hard counters for this ship are newts and especially tracking disruptors. The optimal range for this ship is not that high, and remember that disintegrator weapons do not have fall off, and as soon as you drop out of optimal, the spool resets. So tracking disruptors are extremely annoying against this ship, and if you fly like a slow brawler and you face against a fast even scrum kiter, especially like a web kiter or kiter with tracking disruptor, you just cannot really do that much in Nergal. This is why kiting is just generally superior. Now, as I said, tank is very good, damage is very good if you can stay up in the spool range, and control is reasonable. So you have 3 medium slots, and usually you use all 3 medium slots for control. So you have micro warp drive, tackle, and you can have a defensive or offensive web, or Scrum. Some people use Scrum in the third medium slot. Now, in terms of performance, as I said before, you can engage practically everything. All ships in faction warfare, so that is frigates and destroyers, they generally just do not have a raw DPS to break the tank of Nergal, even with a single rep. We will see it in the next portion of the video. And if you fight against cruisers, you can simply mitigate, because Nergal is an assault frigate and you still get bonus to signature radius for macro warp drives. You only just need to kill the drones, and typically the guns are not a problem. Of course, Nergal just rapidly loses value when you fight against multiple opponents. So it may look very strong against in 1v1, and these are all data for 1v1s. But once you fight like 1 versus 2, 1 versus 3, and above, Nergal just gets worse and worse and worse. Because your range is fairly poor for a kiter, and you need to spool on a single target, which is not always possible when you fight against multiple opponents. So the important disclaimer in general about this ship is that it's very good only in 1v1. But if you want to fight against multiple opponents, Nergal will be a bit less impressive when it may appear by looking at these graphs. In the yearbook, I recommended 2 feats for Nergal, both kiting feats. One is macro warp drive kite and the other is Tenement kite. I found that macro warp drive kite is a bit easier to use and it's a bit cheaper. And Tenement is a bit better in general, but more difficult to fly and more expensive. The choice is yours. I think both work perfectly fine. For macro warp drive feat, you have MWD, warp disruptor, and a cap booster for a cap, then plenty of tank in low slots, and rigs for speed and agility. Now it's important to use A-type small rep instead of ancillary rep, because sustained tank is one of the win conditions for Nergal. And as you can see, you have 7k EHP plus pretty good SIG tank mitigation plus ADC plus sustained rep. Even without any drugs, you get 120, and if you drop some decent drugs and implants, you can easily go way above 150, which is a lot of tank for a kiting ship. Like, it's really not that easy to project even 200 DPS to 24 kilometer range in a frigate or a destroyer. The DPS is pretty good. You start with only 70 DPS, but it spools up pretty fast, and after about a minute you're actually hitting very hard. And it spools up to 370, which is insane DPS for a kiter. But in my experience, you actually very rarely get to that point. Usually once you hit like 200, 250, people's tongue just start falling apart. Now, and you also have very good tracking. So one of the issues with many kiters is poor application, but Nergal has no issues with application. If you are in range, you will hit. What's the only weakness? The only weakness is the range. So you only have 21 kilometers. You can slightly extend it with frantics, but generally it's still not that high. And you have to fly like a very committed kiting style. especially once your guns pulls up a bit. But it's not really that big of a deal in 1v1. It is a deal, it is a big deal in 1 versus many, because it really limits your ability to fly around the grid and apply damage against a single target. But in 1v1, not really that big of a problem, especially considering that you don't even mind getting scrummed at some point during the fight, because once you spool up, your DPS and your tank is actually so high that even if you get scrummed, it's very unlikely that your opponent will break you. It is only a problem if you get scrummed like literally on the warping, when it can be a problem. But once you're like 30-50 seconds in the fight, you generally don't really care. And you can fly very aggressively. So the alternative is the 10MN feat. Why is it a bit better, I found? Well, you can be a lot more aggressive with 10MN. Even against, especially against multiple opponents. So if you get scrummed in this ship against multiple opponents, you may not tank. Against 1v1 it's fine, but against multiple opponents it can be a problem. But in this one you can fly pretty close, you can get webbed even, and it still should give you enough mobility and enough tank to survive and apply DPS. And you have much better control with this feat because you have a very long web. I think that good web is crucial in this feat. I know that some people fly with Scrum, but I think long web on a 10MN web kiting ship is just better. 18 kilometers, it means that you will have a very hard control across the entire optimal range, essentially. So what else? Why is it more difficult? Well, the problem is with only 10 kilometers of range and the speed of 1.7, of course you can hit, but it's still, with this agility, it's not that impressive. People can just try to bail. And it may be more difficult to keep your opponents within optimal range. Again, in 1v1 it's not a problem. You have a super long web. Once you apply the web, they're not going anywhere. Because minus 60% against 10MN, they're not going anywhere. But against multiple opponents, you need to be like very strategic about your positioning. Which ship do you want to control and which ship do you want to DPS down? And this ship relies on spooling, so it's very important to make the right decision, because otherwise you will have to spool again. And because of two expensive modules, this feat is quite a bit more expensive. In general, I think another like balancing factor for Nergal is cost. Of course, we are talking about assault frigates, and typically most assault frigates will cost you like 50 to 70 million ISK. Nergal will cost you 300 plus, which is quite expensive. But if ISK is not a problem for you, and if you know what you are doing, then this ship is perfectly fine. Now, the last thing I want to say is about feats with 1MN. I'm not even gonna show them, but you will see a few of them on the kill board. My advice, do not use them, and the reason why I mentioned in the beginning of the video. If you get tackled by a kiter with tracking disruptor, you are just dead. There is nothing you can do, because 20-kilometer range against tracking disruptor, you will be down to like 12 to 13 kilometers, and you simply will not have enough control to contest it. and after that your opponent will call for help and you will just get killed. In these feats, it's not a problem. With micro warp drive you have enough mobility to escape if need be, and with 10 MN you have a super long web and again enough mobility to really pressure your opponent if he decides to kite with track and disruptor. But 1 MN can get hard countered by like 5 million condor, so just do not do that. Okay, I hope you found it useful. This is a very fun ship. I think it's really underused, and if you want to try something that's really off meta, certainly try Nergal. It's really good. See you in the next videos.